In this lesson, I'd like to talk about a layer style that works really well with our text, and that is the bevel and emboss layer style. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over to our Google Classroom and grab our, oops, grab our D2 and open this up in Photoshop. So all this is a document that just has some random letters in a gray type color font. Notice, however, that it is no longer editable as type. It has already turned into a rasterized layer, which means that this text is actually editable as pictures right now. So a couple of things first. Let's make sure that we are selected on our headline layer. And then we're going to go down to our FX, which is our layer styles. And we're going to open up the bevel and emboss layer style. Okay, so this, I'm going to pull this off to the side, hopefully so you can see a little bit more. This dialog box looks similar to all of our other layer styles, except that there are just more options for us to choose from. So with the style, you have the option to do an outer bevel, an inner bevel, an emboss, a pillow emboss, and a stroke emboss. So we're going to talk about a few of them in this lesson, but again, as I said with layer styles in Unit C, the best way to work with these is to try to find, just to play around with them and find the ones that you like. So to start off with, we're going to do just a regular emboss. So go ahead and click on emboss. Depending upon the style that you choose, the technique will be different. So we have the option for smooth, we have the option for chisel hard, and we have the option for chisel soft. We're actually going to go with just a smooth option here for this one. You can set the depth if you want to. I'm going to leave my depth at 100%. And then, of course, you can choose the size and the soften value. So I'm actually going to bump my size up to like 24-ish. And the greater you get, the more you see what it looks like with this emboss happening here. And so for now, let's just go ahead and click OK. And then I want you to, once your FX pops up, I want you to hide and show your different effects so you can see what that looks like when we put the emboss on there. Now, just for the sake of trying different things, let's double click on our effects to open up our dialog box. Oops. I want to click on my bevel and emboss, sorry. There we go. Double click on our bevel and emboss. Come on. My computer is just being so slow tonight. There we go. So let's change our style from emboss. Let's do an inner bevel, just so we can see the difference here. So let's choose inner bevel, and then for the technique, let's choose chisel hard. And so you can see how that really changes the look of the text when we work with that. Let's set our depth to 120. And again, I have numbers that I've already found and set aside, so I know what I'm looking for. But you could just play around with this until you find the look that you want. Feel free to do that. And then let's set our size to 44. And we're going to leave the soften value at 0, and then click OK. So once again, let's hide and show that effect so you can see the difference. Without the effect, we have a very flat looking text, and obviously when we add the effect, we get that real sense of depth. Almost looks like metal with this bevel and emboss. So it can be a really fun layer style to add to text. So that is how we do the bevel and emboss. Now, with the bevel and emboss, there is a special feature called the gloss contours. So I'd like you to double click on your bevel and emboss layer style again to get our dialog box to come back up. And then I want to bring us down into the shading section. Again, you can play around with all of these. What I'm going to spend some time on is this gloss contours preset. So if you open this up, you're going to see that Photoshop has about 12 different presets for gloss contours. And all gloss contours are a set of presets with brightness and contrast that kind of Photoshop has designed to make it look like light is shining on the text differently. So right now we have just the basic linear. Go ahead and click through these just so you can see what some of these different gloss contours look like and how they change the look of your text based on what gloss contour you're choosing. So they really have some really neat ones in here, some really cool looking effects that you can make with those gloss contours. We are going to choose the cone option, which is the second one on the very top, and then go ahead and click OK. So those are gloss contours. Very can make some really cool effects. So play around with those. Don't forget about those when you're doing your text in Photoshop and working with your bevel and emboss. Now, one thing we can also do with bevel and emboss is to make what's called a double effect. And I haven't showed you this yet. Right now, remember what we have on here is an inner bevel. If you forget, I'm just going to double click on my little dialog box to show you that we've got an inner bevel happening right now. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer. So again, like I said before, I like to just do the Control J, but feel free if you want to right click and do duplicate or go to layer and duplicate, whatever works best for you. So we have our headline copy now, and what I'd like us to do with this one is actually drag it down below the headline layer, and we're going to drop it so that the headline copy is underneath. And then we're going to change the name of this to outer bevel. So we're going to change our layer style to an outer bevel. And then where it says headline, we're going to change this to inner bevel. So like I said, right now we have that inner bevel effect on there. What we want to do is change our bottom layer to have an outer bevel. So let's double click on our outer bevel layer and then double click where it says bevel and emboss to open up our layer style. And what we're going to do is we're going to change this to an outer bevel. And right now you're like, oh my goodness, that looks awful. I know, because we need to change a few things, so don't panic. We're going to leave it as a chisel hard, but we're going to change the depth down to 100 again. Sometimes it's easier to just type in instead of using those sliders. Excuse me. Our size we're going to change down to 13. And then we're going to set our soften still at 0. And we're going to change our gloss contour to the Cove Deep, which is the fourth one in on the first row. So go ahead and click OK. And what I want you to do is to hide and show your effect on your outer bevel and just see what happens when we did that. So you can see there's our inner bevel. That's what it looked like before we did anything. Our doubled effect was that we added that outer bevel, and it really gave a sense of depth to our text. So don't be afraid to try something like that where you do a double effect. You just duplicate your text layer or whatever it happens to be, and you do an inner bevel with an outer bevel, and you really create a sense of depth on your graphic. If you want to see too what the outer bevel looks like, go ahead and hide that top copy, the inner bevel, and you can see what the outer bevel looks like. You've got that kind of beveled edge, and it faces out instead of in. So that is also kind of a cool look if you wanted to do just that. Obviously, we added the inner bevel, so you get kind of a, oops, where you get kind of a double whammy there. So that is our lesson on inner bevel and outer bevel. A really cool layer style that you can use particularly on text, but it works well with just about anything. Shapes, images as well. This is all that we need this file for, so you can go ahead and close this. And again, you do not need to save.